What's the value of this? Being able to sit on this rock and look out, it's worth nothing, it's worth a lifetime.
Every study that's been done indicates that we're driving full blast for the edge of the cliff.
Raised temperatures at the North Pole, 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
What oil means to us today.
But I say, the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
At the northernmost edge of human civilization, the Arctic landscape is awakening to unprecedented change. This is the fastest warming place on Earth, and we have arrived during the hottest ever Arctic summer since records began. The defining issue of our time is making headlines here on a daily basis. In the Arctic Ocean, halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole, lies the islands of Svalbard. Historically, the region has been marked by human achievements in polar exploration, but it has also been scarred by human exploitation. In 1920, the signing of the Svalbard Treaty paved the way for the citizens of 46 countries to exploit the region for natural resources. Today, most of the coal mines have shut down, and Svalbard has evolved into an international research hub for climate science. Scientists document the changing Arctic, which is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. Since 1993, the University Center in Svalbard has been training the next generation of polar scientists. And the first lesson, what happens in the Arctic, affects the whole world.
We need all the talent that we can find in the world that can help us to understand the climate system here, to become the future polar scientists for the benefit of all of us. We have built this facility to be able to teach efficiently and safely. This is the gun rack for the students. The guns are necessary for protection when we're out in the field. So as soon as you leave Longyearbyen, you must carry adequate protection from polar bears.
On our travels, we see the first evidence of climate change marking the landscape.
We must be more civilized than to have death in order to start paying attention.
This year, reindeers died in record numbers across Svalbard. The warm weather is causing unusual winter rain. This forms an impenetrable layer of ice on snow, preventing the reindeer from grazing on grass and plants beneath, and they starve to death. As winter turned to summer this year, more than 200 carcasses like this one were found.
Reindeer have always lost their lives in the harsh elements, but we see clear trends that we relate to the climate change. We need a planet where human life, natural life is the default. we do not jeopardize other living species' ability to be on this planet. I feel that the narrative around climate change is simplistic. What can I do? What should you do? There's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of even shame words used. I think that creates a negativity about the whole discussion, and we waste energy on scolding each other rather than looking for solutions.
Under the landscape, climate change is writing a new chapter. Arctic permafrost, frozen beds of soil and rock, is rapidly thawing. Scientists are beginning to realize this is happening at a rate that could be catastrophic for the climate.
Permafrost is very closely connected to climate, and as permafrost starts to thaw or degrade, that ice starts to melt and the landscape becomes unstable. One of the issues connected to permafrost change, which we're starting to become concerned about, is permafrost change in hill slopes and how that relates to things like landslides.
Homes are at risk of falling into the sea. Avalanches have claimed lives here, but the implications of permafrost thaw go beyond. 1/4 of the entire northern hemisphere is covered in permafrost, and locked inside are gigatons of carbon, nearly twice the amount in the atmosphere today.
So this is one of our sites where we're measuring temperature in the ground. This borehole here goes down 30 meters into the permafrost. Inside we have a data logger, and distributed along the data logger is a series of temperature sensors. And so we measure temperature here 4 times a day, every day of the year. Sites like this are important because temperature is very important for permafrost. As temperature changes, we also start to see visible changes in the landscape.
Along another remote coastline in Svalbard, Arctic police from the governor's office have arrived to deal with the problem related to climate change. Thermal imaging reveals rising temperatures deep within the Earth. This is under the burial ground of 16th century whalers. Erosion and thawing permafrost means the graves are at risk of being exposed, so they have to be removed. Nobody can be buried on Svalbard anymore. All bodies are flown to the mainland for burial rites. Nearby, buried into the side of a mountain, is an underground bunker nicknamed the Doomsday Vault. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault opened in 2008 to safeguard the world's variety of plant seeds from future disasters. The permafrost at this location provided natural refrigeration, but the warming climate has put the vault's future at risk. The Norwegian government is now spending $12 million to rebuild it, but a question lingers over its future. In the air above Svalbard, the speed of change is being captured. Engineering students from the Arctic University of Norway are helping to design small drones for the Svalbard police to use for mapping missions.
We have a problem and they have possibly a solution, so we made them make a drone that could fly for a very long time. And what we wanted to use is to use this drone as communication relay. So we put the communication equipment on their drone and then they flew it. So it's kind of a high antenna driven by a drone, so up to 100 meters.
On board the Helmer Hansen research vessel, Norwegian climate scientists monitor the warming Arctic Ocean.
I think the most visible sign here is the fact that the fjords are not ice covered during winter. For the last 13 years, the fjord have been ice-free. If you look at changing biodiversity over time, there's geology work going on here. Scientists who take deep course into the ocean floor to look at the past history of what the climate used to be some 100,000, maybe millions years ago.
Data collected proves Atlantification is taking place. Cold, fresh Arctic waters are changing to warm, salty Atlantic seas, transforming the region's ecosystems. If current warming continues, total Atlantification could happen by 2040, with unknown consequences for the Arctic and the planet.
It is predicted that it will be a 5 to 8 degrees change in temperature within 2030 and up to 10 degrees when it comes to 2080. So in the high Arctic the changes are much more pronounced. It is not compatible with a healthy ocean, a healthy world, if we don't change our behavior. What's happening in the Arctic can influence the whole world. Burning fossil fuels is not compatible with a healthy world in the future. We have to catch all the CO2 that's out there and remove it from the atmosphere. The more we add and the more it will affect the climate. It's a very serious matter that's ahead of us.
The Near-Ocean Research Station is the world's northernmost science community and the final human settlement before the North Pole. Research institutions from around the world have a presence here and collaborate on research related to climate change. The Norwegian Polar Institute hosts the station on behalf of the Norwegian government. Scientists here are at the forefront of understanding the warming effects in the Arctic.
This is a place where we have seen great changes since I came. Over the last 10 years, this glacier has retreated something around 1 to 2 kilometers. This area has had dramatic changes with regard to climate change. Very noisy. Big piece. The glaciers are retreating as we see here. We used to have a polar system in this area with species belonging to the polar ecosystem. Now we have Atlantification, it's warm water which are in this area. And this warm water has melted the sea ice. There are winners and losers in the system. We are now going to a beach which is up to the outer part of Kongsfjorden. There is more current in that area, so we will try to find a beach which we can use for science. In a distance here of 100 meters, we have picked some of the things which we can see of the plastic. And as you can see, mostly it's fishery related. In Svalbard we have seen that 80% of the plastic to be found on beaches is related to fishery industry. There is a lot of ropes, there are nets, there is these oil cans which are being used, bottles of soda, and we also find a straw here. One-time use plastic. When the plastic has been laying on the beach for some time, it's starting to break up in small pieces like this. And you get this kind of small fragments in something which are, 1 to 5, 6 millimeters in size. These are the ones which are then being eaten by, for instance, the fulmar. Now, I'm very concerned with plastic pollution. The industry are producing 350 million tons of plastic every year. 10 to 12 million tons is going to the sea. And they have a prognosis for a 3 times increase from until 2050. Now we are up in more than 800 species being affected. This has dramatic consequences. If we are going to save the ocean as also a future place to get food, we really need to take care of it. We shouldn't shit in it. It's a wake-up call. This is a reindeer which has been killed by the net getting entangled, and it has been probably stuck there and it has starved to death. Every year we find reindeers which are entangled. At one point we find 5 reindeer which was entangled into a net and died there. It's happening every year. 1976, every human was using 2 kilos of plastic. In 2017, Every human in the world uses 43 kilo of plastic. And at the same time, it has been a doubling of humans in the world. It's happening much faster here than we see in the rest of the world. It is really important also to communicate to the Asian people about what's going on. It's far away, from where they are. It's important that they also got to know that they are also contributing to what we see in the Arctic.
On this journey, we have learned what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. We are all connected in this global ecosystem. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the effects of a warming Arctic are being felt.
Despite being half the world away, literally, Singapore and the Arctic there's an indirect link that is brought about by climate change. We know that during the summer in the Arctic, the sea ice melts and it's been melting at a rapid rate.
In the Arctic, sea ice reflects sunlight back to space. The melting ice and warmer oceans in turn reflects less sunlight, accelerating global warming. This is opening new shipping routes through the Northern Passage, sparking a race between nations, jostling to assert power on the region.
Maritime Singapore is the busiest transshipment hub in the world. The climate change has actually impacted everyone in the maritime industry. We believe that it will impact trade flows moving through the Straits of Malacca in Singapore. But we really have to identify both the challenges and opportunities that Singapore will have based on this opening of the Arctic routes.
Due to climate change, we are getting a lot more frequent and more intense rainfall. Most of Singapore has already been very densely built up. We can't keep widening the drains. There's not enough space. We have to be more innovative. We built a detention tank to hold back the storm water instead of widening the canal. We actually can let the storm pass, then the water can be released back to the canal. So that will actually free up a lot of land use. The design capacity of the tank is until here. The tank will be filled with 38,000 cubic meters of water, which is about 15 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This is a vital drainage infrastructure in Singapore.
With rising global temperatures, what we will probably see in the forests and habitats here is that plant species and animal species that are not adapted to such increase in temperatures, they will be displaced from their environment. One way the seed bank can help is we collect the seeds of these plants, we conserve them and protect them inside the seed bank, and they can be taken out in the future to germinate and to be planted out and reintroduced back to the appropriate habitats. We're also looking at plants of the whole region as well, to collect and also to protect and also to conserve these seeds in the seed bank. So in Singapore, we have been greening up all our urban areas, from the parks to the streetscapes, even to buildings where we actually introduce vertical greening and rooftop gardens. Plants help to taking carbon dioxide. Plants also help to reduce the urban heat island effect on urban areas, so this cools down the environment generally.
We can't resist the need for action on climate change. It is to our best interest, it's to your own interest to incorporate sustainability thinking. Renewable energy is the way to the future, that fossil fuels are on the way out. It's a sunset industry. It's easy to sink into despair that there's nothing that can be done, but look at the past. There are historical precedents that can be followed, that can show the way towards aligning everybody's interests towards mitigating climate change. I remain optimistic that such a path can be followed as well, rapidly, in the years to come to deal with climate change.
We must create a way of discussing it that doesn't pitch us against each other and doesn't paint it as the good life that we've had is being lost. No, we're moving towards a better society with a better future, with a better life together. Success values should look at another time scale than the immediate pleasure of this moment.